All right, let's play a little game. If I asked you to name your favorite 1970s independent, darling little indie film, what would you name and why? Now, the reason I asked that is because I am gonna name mine, and I just watched it for the first time the other day, and it's called Straight Time with Dustin Hoffman. And it's directed by Dustin Hoffman and Ulu Grossbard, and it has Dustin Hoffman, Harry Dean Stanton, I can't remember her name. Her last name's Russell. She was Jenna Russell, I think. She's fantastic. Kathy Bates makes an appearance. Gary Busey's in it. It's such a good movie. Simplicity. I'm all about simplicity. And those 1970s films. This is why it's one of my favorite 1970s films right now, because the 1970s weren't afraid to put forth an anti-hero. You didn't have to like him, right? How many people can we name from the 1970s characters, leads, protagonists who were not likable, or they were wrong, or they were disgusting in some sort of way, like Taxi Driver, or, the list will go on and on. This kind of fits into that category, but it's so simple and subtle and done so beautifully well. It just pulls you in. It's interesting to see Dustin Hoffman play this type of character. I've seen a lot of Dustin Hoffman films, but you kind of forget that he can play the bad guy in a weird way. And people are going to start naming films where he's the bad guy. But for some reason, I associate him with Tootsie and other things. But Outbreak, was he in Outbreak? I think he was. But he's so good in this. I think he's like 39, 40, but he looks kind of like a young man. And I don't know, it just takes me back to the days of being a young lad, and watching these adults in the 1970s interact. They got no idea of what's to come digitally, the synthesizer 80s or the AOL online 90s or the crisis that's hitting us now with Instagram. They don't know and they don't care. They're in it. They're having real food and they're drinking real beer with real people in the bars. The only connection they have is when they go out into the world, and you feel it throughout this film. As the camera follows him wherever he goes, it's just that feeling of being so connected, being in you're obviously in another time, but it feels like you're in a completely different place, to get lost in the wilderness of the earth. Whereas now it feels like you can't do that, There's cameras everywhere. You couldn't, back then, if I kept watching this thinking, if you wanted to be an ex-con, that's the time to be one, or previous. Because, if you got out of jail, you skipped parole or whatever, you just go somewhere else. They're not going to find you. In the 1970s, they might have found you. But if you can find your way to the other side of the country or the continent or another continent, they're never going to find you, period. That's it. And there's downsides to that as well, but that's one of the beautiful things about this movie, is that you can really feel that you feel that sense of freedom, right? But they're not fully aware of it in the context of what's to come. So I'm not sure if they're fully appreciating it. Maybe they wanted things to get more surveilled or digitized or things like that because they were pushing for technology. That's how we ended up here, right? Every invention stands on the shoulders of previous inventions. So they had to be wanting this. They're using technology, is my point, but not anywhere near the level that we're using it today. And to go back to this idea of being sort of an anti-hero, it's one of those things that has changed movies a lot, in terms of the way I look at them. So I go back and look at, let's say, Chevy Chase versus Bill Murray films, and I love Bill Murray, right? But I heard Tarantino talk about this once, about how I loved Chevy Chase films more because Chevy Chase doesn't turn into a good guy. You know what I mean? He's an asshole at the beginning and he's an asshole at the end. Whereas Bill Murray in Groundhog Day or whatever, not that he wrote them, but that he starts out an asshole And he kind of learns his ways. He goes to therapy. He's got a love language, and boom, all of a sudden he's like the perfect spouse or something like that. Whereas Chevy Chase is like, I'm not fucking playing that game. You know, I'm a dick in the front of the movie. I'm a dick at the back of the movie, and that's it. And I wonder if that approach to his characters or the movies that he took is because he sort of came out of the 1970s. You know, that feeling of realness is what I love about it. You know, that you can have an unlikable lead. Not that they're a terrible person, you know, but they're just complicated, dark, maybe apathetic. They have a gloomy outlook on things, nihilism, whatever it is. And that's what you feel in this movie. The point of this is to explain that this is what that movie feels like. When you feel Dustin Hoffman, his character's walking through and you see him getting into trouble and you think, oh my God, dude, you're on parole for a serious crime. I think it was armed robbery. And like, what are you doing? You're gonna, you know, things happen. I won't give it all away, but because I think a lot of people haven't seen it. It's on Criterion Collection. But you're just watching him continue to fuck up his life and self-sabotage, and you think, oh, this guy, you know. And there's a really interesting relationship between him and, oh God, her last name's Russell. I wish I could remember. Jenna Russell, I think. My apologies. She's so great. She's this innocent young woman that he meets at the unemployment office. They start a relationship. She's actually on board with a lot of the shady stuff that he's doing. And I think it's because she kind of thinks, well, I'm at this job 9 to 5 and I'm kind of getting by, but there's a lot of injustice in this world, and I don't fault this guy for trying to get ahead in an abnormal way. Yeah, he's committing crimes, but I don't think he's hurting anyone, or at least maybe at the beginning she thought that. But you know, there's this interesting dynamic in their relationship where he's actually honest with her and says to her, you know, you gotta tell me if you're on board with this. You know, and it's interesting because he comes home one night once they start hanging out, and she asks him where he's been, and he just tells her, you know, because that's the way to go about it, right? Honesty. And that's one of the things I think that is, if you want to look at some of the differences between now and then, when you have a situation now where you kind of have to have like a likable character, you're going to get dishonesty, because not everyone's going to be honest if they have to be liked all the time, right? So that's what I love about these 1970s characters, is that they're dirty, they're not clean, they might have problems, they might not be likable, they might be criminals, and not that they're always honest in the 1970s, but that characteristic of being honest and saying, look, I'm a criminal, so if you can handle this in our relationship, great. If not, just tell me and I'll walk out. It's beautiful, right? And the way that sort of drives his character throughout the movie is so interesting to watch, because there are some really intense moments for sure, and the way that they kind of go through the movie carrying out these big acts without a big score and a big, you know, car chase. There might be a few foot chases or a little bit of a car chase, but it's not like a William Friedkin picture where there's shit flying over the 401 and cars toppling and police cars jumping off of a cliff to, you know, but it's real. That's my point, is that it's real, it feels real, it's something that you can connect to if you're into that sort of thing. And God, I wish they made movies like this still. But you know what? They still can, and they still do. We just don't look into the same spots. And I wonder if with the rise of the YouTube filmmakers at the beginning of this, I wonder if there's going to be, you know, more, it's kind of not a throwback, but kind of this kind of thing where you have more honest characters that are anti-heroes, or they're not necessarily likable. And if you watch some of my films on my Spaces with Light channel, you'll see that I'm not trying, it just comes out because this is the stuff that I like. where you have sort of these abstract characters that you're not really sure whether you like them or not, or you're kind of on board with them, but they look vulnerable, or maybe they have a dark side. I love that kind of shit. So that's my pick. Straight time, Dustin Hoffman. It's on the Criterion Collection. Appropriate running time. You know, it's Christopher Nolan got his hands on this. It'd be 6 hours long. I love Christopher Nolan. I'm just joking. You know, hour and 54-minute film or whatever it is, mwah, to perfection. So let me know what yours is. If you've seen it, I'd like to know what you think of this movie. I don't know too many people have seen it. And then also remember to sign up for the Patreon, because that's the movie club, movie raffle club. You sign up for the Patreon every month. I pick a name out of a hat or whatever, and I send the name from this Patreon. Everyone who's a member of the Patreon gets in there every month, and I send you surprise DVDs, plural. Wouldn't that be fun to get some, you know, tangible mail? Does anybody get mail out there besides bills? I don't. I would love to be a part of the movie raffle club, but some people have to run it. So check that out. Let me know what you think. What's your pick for a darling 1970s indie film? I want to hear it. Straight time, Dustin Hoffman. You got to watch this film.